Boom. Awesome. Cool. So I'm here with Kyvann from Bodega Jiu Jitsu. Just want to hop in, talk about training, what's going on. Real quick, what are you working on in your training room right now? What's the vibe? What are you working on? Why?
I mean, the last 8 months we've been, we've dove in completely into the eco world, and I think that's probably why you got messages about us. So really, we just focus on, what it is, task-based, specific games, and we've been doing that pretty consistently for like the last 8 months over at Bodega. So that's really what our major focus has been. I work with Greg obviously a ton on it. He's helped me so much throughout that. Greg Souders over at Standard, and he's been super helpful. So that's really kind of the major difference in what we've been doing lately.
Nice. So what was your I know people are always curious, like, what was your implementation like? What were you doing before? How'd you sort of flip the switch? I know
Yeah,
I was like just a person who just ripped the band-aid off, switched everything immediately, like
yeah.
overnight. How about yourself?
All right, so I think a lot of it has to do with my personality type, number one, because I've always hated the way traditional classes were ran. Like I always just felt like it wasn't enough work, and I felt like I would always ask people to end up staying after class to train, or I would really just like fast forward to the part where we would do something live just to work on what I wanted to work on. Sometimes even without trying to be disrespectful, I would use that time to work on, the time they're teaching technique for those 30 minutes where you're just like, brainlessly doing nothing, no thought process at all, just like mindlessly doing these movements. I would like pick about somebody and be like, hey, you want to come over here and like do these moves and work these situations while they would do that. So when I opened up my own gym, we've been open for a year. The only way I knew how to teach at the time was with, the IP style, traditional, like just teaching move and then having them drill it. And I did it for like a month, did it for like 2 months. And I just really would try to fast forward that part to the point where we would just get to situational sparring and live. So we would do like 15-minute, 20-minute of technique, then situational and live. And, that was the majority of my work. And then I came across some games from Greg and I was like, all right, let me try a couple games. And then I started to listen to all his podcasts and his theory and his thought process. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So I tried one class on something I felt really comfortable with, which at the time was passing, without, which was still teaching because I was just unaware. It was just my ignorance. But like teaching like a minute and then having a game to reinforce the technique. And I did that the whole class. And I just saw the output and the learning just like skyrocket in that one class. And I was like, oh, dude, I have to find out more about this. So the transition happened slowly, which I feel like a lot of people do, which is like, I'll try a game out, I'll try 2 games out, and then either you're all in or you're like, I think this is just a tool I'll use sometimes. But for me, I was like, I still train myself. So I was like, I get to train with my students when we do this. I get to make sure that we're reinforcing fundamentals and advanced concepts through these games. And I'm not forcing or pretending that I know the answer to some things that I don't know the answer to. So it's been really eye-opening, helpful, and reinvigorating, to be honest. Like, I'm a black belt. I've been training for about 12, 13 years. And it's just been, I feel like I wish I'd found this for myself a long time ago.
When you talk about the part for yourself, I know for a lot of people, like one of the things that they really enjoy when they're sort of running practice in this way is it just forces them to like think about jujitsu. And I know for me, like I experienced a good amount of growth of like understanding of the game, which I thought
Yeah.
was maybe one of the secret benefits. Is I had to really like engage with the material. Has it sort of changed how you think about jujitsu or how you think about like what's important, what's not important?
Yeah, drastically, drastically. I saw this meme the other day that just resonated with where I'm at so perfectly. And it was like, purple belt advice. Like, yeah, you need to grab this angle and then find the fulcrum and look for a wedge. And then you're going to place the secondary leg. And it's like, this long, and then it's like black belt advice is like, have you tried controlling the neck? Like, it's like, I know that's it's hilarious, but it's really changed my approach to jiu-jitsu drastically, and especially in our competition room and our regular all levels class. Just again, I know it's so hammered in with the eco, but instead of just trying to spam a move or being like, today I'm going to try these knee slice over and over and over and over again. It's like, why don't I win the inside space, find a way to control the hips, beat the legs? It's just really changed my focus. If anything, maybe not my jujitsu as much, but more my focus. I think it's the battles in between me as a black belt doing this as long as I have. Like, I mean, I don't mean as long as I've trained. I mean, doing the information processing as long as I have already my core set of moves I feel comfortable with. I think what has changed for me is just how I get there or what I do from there. Just because it's already ingrained in me. So I'm almost like working backwards. But on my white belts, people who haven't trained, like we have these two kids, I call them Eco Jack and Eco Beckett. They've never trained elsewhere. This is all they know. They never, like, the way they ask questions is different than how I would have asked questions. And that also has been so eye-opening to me. Like, when you have information processing, you think, all right, well, what's the answer? You ask your coach, like, when I'm doing this, what should I do? And now my guys don't ask me that. They'll be like, I'm having a hard time here. Like, what am I not focusing on? And it's such a different question. And I don't know, it's just really, I get so passionate about it because it's so exciting for me. I felt like I needed this breath of fresh air in jiu-jitsu as well. So,
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation. I find my students' questions are way better. Like they're
yeah.
much more particular, they're way more specific, and I can tell they understand like why they're failing, so that's where the question comes from rather than just like wondering what they should be doing. Like, this thing is happening, which I
Yeah.
think just that awareness is huge. Now, your club is young. It's a year old,
Yeah.
8 months of you sort of hopping in. So
Mhm.
what's like the makeup of your room? Do you just run like an all
Yeah.
levels situation? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so we only do Nogi. We're a Nogi only school. And the first 3 months was kind of just like everything. Like we had some purple belts join. I've been really fortunate to come from like a really big gym, pure mixed martial arts. So I had like a good amount of notoriety in the area, and so we had like all levels, like people who'd never trained, white belts who trained 6 months, to brown belts, purple belts, and some blue belts. But we also run a competition style class, or we call it our pro trainings. That's Mondays and Thursdays, usually at 10 a.m. to 12, and that has like primarily really high level guys. Like it's ran by me and Gianni Grippo, so that class is usually mostly high level guys, but that's invite only. So every night class is all levels, and not to dive too far into that, but what we do for the class is we scale each game depending on your level. So I'll always be like, hey, 6 months and under, if you don't, if you haven't been here for 6 months, do this version of this game. 6 months and over, we can take it to the next step or scale of the game. I don't know if that
Hmm.
makes sense, but
Yeah, actually, I would love to unpack that a little bit more. So, is this for like every game in your session? You have like an option one, option two, or at least attempt two, or just give me like an example.
yeah, perfect. So most games. So let's say this week we're doing Kimuras. So that figure four lock, right? We'll do, let's say, Dorsey from the top, like when they're on the side and you have that Kimura. We'll start the game with just controlling. Hold this position as long as possible. Bottom player, try to escape the elbow. Don't give up your back, etc. If you escape, switch positions. For the next level, it'd be like we can take it to, like Greg would say, breaking and back taking. We could say, if you have a way to the back, find a way to get a hook in. If you can finish, find a way to break. And that would be for somebody who already has a fundamental understanding of what that looks like. We can even take it one step back and kind of find a middle ground for someone who's trying to transition from, hey, I feel like I'm okay at the control now. How do I get to a break? We could be like, instead of breaking and back taking, we'll just focus on one or the other. So we scale it that way. It also depends on both players. It's not just one, right? So like if one, I always say it's about who's been there less time, it takes the priority. If there's a guy who's been there 2 years, but he's training with someone who's been there under 6 months, you're just going to play the control game that whole time.
So, are you outlining all the variations at once, or are you going to do like everyone plays level one, and then you might introduce a level two and be like, hey, if
Yep,
you're not ready for this, you do level one again, or
exactly. So we'll always start with level. I haven't called them levels, but we'll always start with level one, and then we'll introduce level two the second game or the second round, and then we'll say, hey, if you're not familiar with this level, stick to level one, so that way you can continue to work and still gain some knowledge of the area and the skill. And then
Mhm.
the people who feel like they already have that or one more can move towards the second one. And my room, like I said, it's young and it's not huge, so I can keep a pretty good eye on average we have 10 to 12 people and on the mat, so I can keep an eye on, like, I know who's been there and who hasn't, so I'll be like, hey Jack, you stick to this, and etc.
Gotcha. Let's just go. How do you like to? What's a practice look like for you? What are you trying to cover? I know people have all sorts of views. Let's just hear your sort of general session.
I mean, I could actually I could tell you what my general session is. So we come in, we do a specific mobility. We're big on mobility. Like I have a business partner, and he comes from the world of like wellness and fitness and just like overall. So we do a 5-minute mobility routine. And then we go straight into the games. Our first game is always a continuous game. That way they can warm up. And if you make it like with a wind condition, I've noticed, in my opinion, that people tend to get hurt or go too hard too quick. So we do a continuous game. Like, for example, we have a game we call the Dirty Feet game, which is just like keep their feet off of you and stay within the line of the heels and ankles. So that's the first game, anywhere from 6 to 7 minutes. And then it's usually 4 to 5 games, followed by live training. The classes are about an hour, hour and a half.
Do you like to do like one sort of main focus for a session, or do you try to do a little bit of all areas?
Yeah, so my biggest thing is I really wanted our room to be what I love doing, number one, and also because I want a part of me to also be in the school, but also to play like the whole game, like Greg would say. So we always focus on a standing game. There's always a standing game for us because I wrestling's a big priority for me. Always a standing game, and then it depends on our week. Like this week we're doing Kimuras. So Kimura from different levels. If I look at my phone real quick, I could probably give you a better understanding. Yeah, like we break it up. So like this week would be Kimuras. Like the week before we did head and arm scenarios. So it could be any, katagatame, it could be Dars, it could be Anaconda. We'll do head and arm scenarios with the legs for a week. We do back for a week, mount for a week. But we always can revert back to the old lessons, which is another huge part of why I love Eco. Because in traditional, it'd be like, all right, this week is, let's say, mount week. And then the whole week you're just working from the mount. Whatever you learned the week before, it's like fucking gone, like you forget already what was here. So here we can be like, all right, we're playing Kimura, right? And then last week, for example, we did the head and arm scenario. If you can move yourself to that head and arm, we can make that game as well. So anyway, our classes are usually an hour and 15 is pretty average. Sometimes we go to an hour and a half, depending on the week, depending on the day. But it's usually 4 or 5 games and then live open rounds.
Okay, cool. When you're planning, are you doing like a weekly theme, or do you sometimes have themes that carry on? How do you sort of decide on that?
Yeah. So we have, I just turned my phone off, so I turned it on. I'm going to actually walk you through exactly what we do. Sorry about that.
The reason I ask is I know like some people, they want to do like a lot of frequency on different things, so they do something each week that's different. Other people really like to do, they'll pre-plan their blocks. Some people are just straight 100% responsive to the room. They move on when they think the room has sort of achieved whatever they're looking for. How do you sort of approach that idea?
So I feel like I'm so on this hype wagon with the Eco. It's funny, but like I find so many benefits to it. I feel like you can connect old lessons or old problems to any area of the game, if that makes sense. So I don't find that issue. If, for example, I don't know, let's just say one kid's really struggling with passing, we could always find a way to incorporate a passing game into the weekly curriculum, even if it's, for example, Kimura. We could find a way to like move a passing game right into the Kimura. But just to be more specific, so we do everything 2 weeks at a time. I don't like the 1 week. We always do 2 weeks at a time. We do 1 week of leg locks, any leg lock entanglements. We'll do games from there. The next week will be arm locks. Then we have one for the back, more specifically strangles from the back. Then we do triangles, which really is just any leg, head, and arm scenario. Then we do front headlock scenarios, which we also call head and arms. And then Kimura. And then we just go in order from every scenario. And then, of course, always including a wrestling game and always including always including a wrestling game on top of that. So that's how we've been doing it. And so I feel when I did it at when I came from pure mixed martial arts, I trained under this two gentlemen, Andy and Michael Main, and those guys taught me so much about running a school, and they had like 500 something students. It was nuts. It was like this always had 80 people on the mat, and they always had this curriculum similar to this. I just found that theirs was too specific for what we do eco style. So like some of theirs could be like half guard week, which we could do a half guard week, but I think that encompasses more of just like a chest to chest passing scenario, if that makes sense. So we kind of just made it a little bit more generic. We just want a framework because it's me and my business partner. I teach the majority of classes. My business partner is there pretty close to equal. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page with all the games that we do. And I'm there every day anyway, so.
Right. What's your lesson plan look like? Are you super detailed? Has it changed over time?
It's changed a little bit. So I've learned with my partner Chaz, business partner Chaz, he's such a good communicator, and I don't think I'm that good of a communicator. And so I was a little bit of control freak in the beginning. I would write out every single game I'd want him to do. And then I just felt like I was kind of limiting, like it's not very eco to be like, hey, do this, do this, do this. And so I felt like I was limiting his ability to grow or be creative. So now I give him options. Like this is a perfect example. Like we're on this Kimura options games, or games I should say, for the week. I've given him 6 or 7 different lesson plans that he can pick from. Instead of saying pick one of these, I give him, for example, I don't know if you can see any of this.
Yep.
But I give him photos included. So I'll be like, here's game or class option A, and here's 4 games for that. Class option B, here's 4 games for that. Class option C, and 4 games for that, and et cetera, et cetera. And he can either use those games as a format or come up with some of his. And I'm in most of his classes, so a lot of times I'll give him feedback on what I think works, what the goal is, if it's too specific. So that's kind of how we structure it now. In the beginning, it was like, hey, let's do these games for the week, and I sent it to him. Now it's like, here's a body of work that you can pick from and see what you like, take ideas from, and then see how you go from there.
When you're sharing that material with them, were all those sort of option A in those 4 games, B in those 4 games, C, are those all in one theme? Like that's all your Kimura
That's
stuff?
just for Kimura. Yeah, that's just for
Gotcha.
Kimura. So, for example, this one's from the Dorsey Kimura, so from the top position.
Mm-hmm.
This one's the bottom half with the Kimura. Then we have the top half with the Kimura. And then we have Kimura from the back. Those are 4 options I gave them with 4 different games underneath all of them.
Gotcha. Okay, so you sort of have like a general framework that you try and pass on.
Yeah.
Curious for you. So all levels class all the time, except for the pro
All the
training.
time.
So everything is a mixed room.
Yeah,
I'm
just...
sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you came up in a different way where there used to be all the tiered classes. You know, there's a beginner or a core, and then a advanced, and then whatever else. As your school grows, do you think you're going to stick with an all levels format, or do you think eventually you'll want to switch it up to like sort of that old tiered situation? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm actually so excited for it to grow and for me to be able to break it up, because I feel like I'm doing not a disservice, because I know they're getting the work they need to be done, and I've seen the room just explode. We'll get into that later, but I've seen them grow. But I'm very much so excited to be able to break up games way more, to make them even simpler for a beginner, and then to add new layers for a complex room. So I'm definitely going to split it up. I'm very excited about that.
Mm-hmm. How are you going to decide your split, you think?
Say it again?
How do you think you'll determine what that splitting point is for your room?
What do you mean?
That's
like
a
like
tricky thing.
skill level?
Uh-huh.
That's a great question. I think we'll probably do mandatory 6 months and under for like a beginner, like let's call it a foundations class. We'll do that probably 6 months and under, like stick to this. And then the all levels, I think we'll do, depending on the person, it's case by case, like if they have any understanding, like wrestling. But I don't know, it's interesting. We're not at that point yet, so that's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it. I would love to see how that plays out. Because right now I'm still thinking in terms of like knowing everybody. So I don't know if I don't think maybe it will, but for a long time would hope for it to grow for me to know everyone in the room. So I think I'll be able to determine that pretty, hopefully justly.
Yeah. So in your session, sounds like you have a lot of like structured games. How much open sparring, like full sparring, happens in that class, or is everything sort of real skill focused?
So I've talked to Greg Souders on it a lot, and he doesn't even do open rolls in some of his classes. I think even most. We make sure to have 2 open rolls minimum. And so some days we'll go up to 5, but on our all levels class, minimum is 2. So we always make sure to, like I said, our class is an hour and 15. It'll be an hour of games, and then the 15 minutes we can use for live rolling. Sometimes we'll go for 30 minutes, like if we're ramping up for a competition or anything like that.
Any reason why you choose to, does it vary for you? Like, because for me, in the beginning, I mostly had all my sessions just be straight games, and then, some sessions I'd sort of split 50-50, sort of like responsive. Do you just like to have the full rolling in there for the guys so that they can get in, get all of their work in, or?
So that's a really good point. In the beginning, we did it at 1 hour, and we would just do games for the hour and sometimes maybe a roll. But we found that people, again, our gym isn't that big yet. Like, I think maybe we're at like 40 something students, which I'm actually so happy about. You have no idea, but I'm just really proud of it. But what I was saying is, it felt like some people would only come twice a week, and so they wouldn't get the work needed, and so we give them that little bit extra, like, hey, make it a just enough hard enough class that they can feel good enough to come back another 3 days and feel like they got enough work in. So we've just gotten to that in the last like 3 months, because in the beginning it was like almost to a T, like an hour. We also found that, I don't know if you found this too, but when we were teaching, we were like, oh wow, it's already been like 45 minutes and it's been like 3 games. We're like, oh snap, like we need to move to the next game or something like that. So I feel like time flies doing the eco style as well.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. It can really be real quick, real quick. For your games, it sounds like you really like to have multiple games in one area with like maybe a different task focus each time. How do you roll with partnering? Because, some people like to run same partner the whole time. Some people prefer to switch it up and not switch to the task as much. Where do you sort of sit on that?
It's funny, man, because I actually love, again, it's just right now the room is big enough that I can do this. I love pairing people up, and I can see kind of skill levels, or for example, if we have a lot of guys that are great wrestlers but not good at jiu-jitsu necessarily. And so like for standing games, I'll pair them specifically with someone either really worse than them so that the other person can gain some knowledge, or like if they're battling with someone at the same level, but that's because I can kind of gauge the room right now. I like to keep them with 1 to 2 partners for the full class. But my business partner, it's so funny, he's like the dire opposite of me. Even with like our music in the class, it's really funny. He'll like switch people up like 3 times in a game, like a 6-minute game. So it'll be like 2 minutes in, be like, all right, switch partners, which I think is cool because you get new looks and it's interesting. But for me, I just feel like there might be too much variation with body types and really hammering home a position. But like I said, I think a lot of our students get both with us, so that's kind of where we're at. I stick to kind of 1 to 2 partners per class, and then he kind of mixes it up as much as possible throughout his class.
You attend most of your business partner sessions, you said?
Almost all of them, yeah.
Yeah. What are sort of the differences in the ways that you two approach sort of running practice? Because it sounds like he's running an equal amount almost, which is...
Yeah. It's very close. Okay, so I've dove all into this like 9 months ago, started really digging into all the podcasts. I was reading all the literature, or as much literature as I could. I was messaging Greg. I was on the Reddits, and I was just really learning as much as I could. Whereas Chaz runs multiple businesses, not just jiu-jitsu, so he's a busy guy, and he's probably the coolest person I know. Like, he just does the coolest shit ever. He'll just be in the most random spots ever. So what I'm trying to say is he might not have all the time to dive into that. And so he's also he's my brown belt. So it seems like he's just teaching everything that I've taught him and figuring out his way now that we're like 8 months in. He's kind of figuring out the path and understanding like the theory behind how we do it. So the major differences I would see is that I think my games right now they feel kind of solid. Like I feel like very confident in everything that I'm teaching. And his games sometimes might be like, hey, we're going to try this out today. We're going to see how this works for us, which I like because I feel like it gives me ideas and also gives him ideas. And like he has like 4 or 5 games now that he feels super confident in, that he can like, just tell without having to look at notes or anything. So those are the major differences. I also feel like the biggest difference, and I want to be careful what I say because I love his classes. So it's not what I'm not trying to like come at him. But like my room seems like a go room. Like I'll explain the game in like a minute and a half, and I'll explain it well enough that both people know their attention, they know what to focus on, they know like the goals and how to win in flip-flop. Whereas he'll spend a longer time explaining the game, maybe some controls. He's still kind of explaining some how-tos, and then I give him examples after, or some feedback of like, hey, maybe you could explain what the point of the control is versus how to do it. And I think that's kind of, and his music's like, it's like calmer. It's like really funny. It's really the opposite. Yeah. So that's kind of the differences I see between us. I gotta be honest, at first, dude, it really rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, man, like we need to get this going, dude. Like people aren't here, like you're hanging out. And then over time, I was just like, why am I being like that? Like, I could totally have this be a part of our energy. Like, just a different vibe is okay. Like my way isn't the only way.
Yeah. Curious. So it sounds like, Chaz, maybe he might be explaining a little bit more things, but when you watch The Room, do you see any difference in how they react given like when you break down and work on some stuff versus when he's laying it out? Or is it just rubbing you?
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I probably went too far in my relationship. So I think because the thing I've been explaining, or not explaining to him, but kind of my perspective has been like, this is where we're starting and this is where we want to end up, right? And it just feels like sometimes he gives them some linear paths to the outcome. Mm-hmm. So I feel like when you see his room, you see the room almost all doing the same pathways for that outcome. Because he explains it so well in a specific way that it kind of funnels everyone to do the same. Whereas mine, I explain the task and the objective pretty well. So there's multiple. Like my room, you'll see 6 people doing 6 different things, but getting the same outcome. So that's kind of what I see the difference. His feel a little bit more funneled or more controlled, if that makes sense, for the outcome. Whereas mine is kind of just like, hey, why don't you experiment with what you can get done as long as you're focusing on this control to that outcome. That's kind of, I definitely noticed that.
Yeah, that's definitely something I can see sometimes with like some of my coaches who are running sessions. Is like, they'll share their top couple solutions and then unintentionally that sort of makes everyone try and just do those ways of dealing with it. Like I was watching like one of my coaches breaking down like some single leg stuff and just defending against it. And he showed a couple ways that he likes to, but it's like, now those are the only things people are trying. Yes. Which is not like, you don't intend to make that happen. Right. But then it just happens because monkey see, monkey do action.
It's so true. That's so true. And that is such a, that's so relatable. That's exactly what kind of happens. Because he's giving them the solutions before the problem. And so that kind of, we've had a lot of conversations about this. And at first I was very like, don't do that. But now I'm trying to encourage him more to just figure out, why does your solution work versus like, how does it? You know what I mean? And it's been really helpful because I've seen him grow and develop in that space. And it's been really cool to see not only our students develop through this style of training, but my coach also develop through this style of training. So that's been really awesome. But that's a really good point. Like just the other day, like here's a Kimura. And he'd be like, what I like to do is I like to put my hands here and use this kind of leverage to get to that position. And then everyone in the room is doing it, because they're like, oh, I didn't know that. Here's something I could try. Mm-hmm. Versus being like, hey, how did you create that leverage, right? Like, how did that create? How did you actually get to that position? Versus like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like, it's just been really exciting to see. Because like at first I would pounce on it. Now it's more of like a, hey, think about it this way, which has been helpful.
Hmm. Yeah, the role of language is so important, right? How can you
Yeah, dude.
communicate your idea in both the simplest way, but communicating simply is hard. You know, it's
Yeah.
not easy to convey your message in the right way because one of the biggest things I think we realize is how important the words you use, how you introduce something, and we all know like your Monday night session is worse than like your Wednesday because by Wednesday you've
Right.
already sort of cleaned up some of your language, some of your cues, you know, what to emphasize or what not to emphasize. Um, for
Absolutely.
you, how much coaching were you doing before opening your school? Were you coaching a lot?
Yeah, so the last when I got my black belt, so like the last 6 months of my brown belt when I got my black belt about 3.5 years ago, I told my coaches, I was like, I really want to open up a spot. And they were like, all right, let's get you teaching more. And so they got me teaching like it started with two, then it started with three classes a week. And then I did a bunch of previous to my own gym, I would do private lessons like all day long just to make ends meet. So I was teaching like all day for like 5 days a week for the last like year and a half before I branched out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
So, you know, it's interesting though, because like for you, then I'm sure you found that the way you had to teach was so different. Not because hey, we're just setting up games and whatever, but just watching, not watching what you say, because I don't want to say like you can say the wrong thing and ruin someone, but just being
right.
more like really trying to craft your language to make something happen.
Yeah.
What's been like your biggest challenge with that?
It's another great thing. I love talking to people who know. Like, I love that you have such a great understanding of this because sometimes I find myself explaining what I'm trying to explain. If that makes sense. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, the language thing with Chaz again, a huge challenge we had. He would be like, "Guys, we're playing this game, and you win by sweeping." And I remember looking at my room and watching like three of my Eco Jack, for example, has
Mm-hmm.
no idea what a sweep means. And so at the
Mm-hmm.
end of class, I was like, "What is a sweep, Jack?" And he's like, "Well, by looking at it, I thought it meant like this." And it was like, and Chaz, I remember Chaz having that moment of like, "Oh snap!" Like he doesn't actually know what a sweep means. And so that's been like just an example of becoming the top player, meaning holding that person down for 3 minutes after you've become the top player, right from the bottom, versus sweep. Or
Mm-hmm.
let's get to a half guard, and then like someone who's day like a week in has no idea what half guard is. They're like, what's half guard? It's like, all right, we're just gonna start with their leg between our leg, and it's like things like that. We've taken almost a step backwards. Maybe not necessarily because I think it helps more, but we've taken a step backwards with our language and being more explicit of literally what's happening versus just using the terminology. Like you know, like the leg lock terminology. Like, oh my goodness, like there's ashi, outside ashi, saddle, honey hole, like same position, four names, honey hole, 411 saddle. And it's like instead we just say we're starting with our leg from the outside and show them, versus using the names. Now, something I have been not struggling with, but finding is that if they don't know what everybody else is calling that name, they might have a hard time following. Let's say they're watching a match and they hear a commentator. So I've had somebody who'd be like, "Hey, I saw them in the game that we do, but they kept calling it outside Ashi," and I'm like, "Oh, that's funny. That's what they call this area." So now I'll teach the position with, like, for example, let's say the half guard, their leg in between my leg, which is traditionally called half guard, so they know. But that's what I've been working on mostly with like my language, making sure that I explain literally what's happening, like what's happening, and then what people might call it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Lots of people that I've spoken to, naming is like a thing. It's like, hey, do I want to label everything in the way that they're gonna find it out in the world when
Yeah,
they're on Instagram, or they're trying to do
right.
self study, or do I want to try and keep it as direct as possible?
Yeah,
Because I know for me, like I try and do both. Like, hey, I'll explain this thing, and like people will call it A, B, C, whatever, just so that they
yeah,
can do a little bit of self study. But then, like, I've talked to some coaches who like never do that. And like they'll
yeah,
figure it out themselves because they can like connect the dots. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm trying to put too much of the onus on me to prepare them for that. But yeah, the naming thing. Curious though. So like when you're talking about like guards and stuff, Are you naming things? How have you changed your language for describing things like that?
Yeah, I'm not naming things anymore. Like I'm at a point now where I'm just focusing on what are we trying to do versus like the specific positions of the area. Like some games will literally just say a leg entanglement. We won't even do like a specific variation, and I'll show what they all look like, and they can pick from there. But the goal is stay as close as possible, control the hip, control the knee line, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've stopped. Some things I think like are just blatantly obvious, like let's say like a body lock. Like then we'll use the word body lock, but that's kind of describing what's happening anyway, or single leg, like it, just so people know what a single leg is from wrestling, but that kind of also describes what's happening. So certain things, I guess, you'll find me using the terminology or the traditional words, but I've been trying not to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find myself like I'm more likely to label like an individual tool like a power half. I'll probably call it a power half because that's what I call using my two hands in this way. Like
Yeah.
that's like a tool. But I won't really, describe my guards or certain things as like, this is, Deli Hiva. It's gonna be like, hey, we're gonna be playing guard where we're trying to have a good hook, either behind the knee from the outside or the inside, And I'll be
Right.
like more apt to use that. Yeah, I'm just always curious on how everyone, because there's some people who really like adamantly don't want to label anything. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Language is sort of like the big human advantage in life, the
Yeah.
ability to have one word unpack and mean a lot of different things.
Sure. I think for me, it's just I don't want my room to. I kind of like. This is so not necessarily a intellectual take here, but I kind of like that my guys don't know what the positions are and they're beating people in those positions.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had this amazing interaction the other day where this blue belt came in, and he's like, "Dude, do you always do that from the 3/4 juji?" And my guy was like, "What did you just say?" He was like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "You just kept doing that. I didn't think that was possible from 3/4 juji." And my guy was like, "Dude, I don't know what you're saying, but I was just holding your shoulder." And I was like, that was like an amazing interaction for me. And I don't know, I took pride in them not knowing. Like I kind of hate that snobby air of like knowing each freaking position's name, even though I know them. It's just like doesn't mean you're good at that position. So
Yeah.
like I really enjoy my room just knowing why something's working when they're in danger versus like the specific name for anything. I don't know. It's been cool, like because I come from the other world. Like I literally
Mm-hmm.
used to be obsessed with instructionals. Me and Johnny used to drill like hours at a time. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I would literally come before class an hour and stay after an hour of drill. So I've been really enjoying just being on the other side of it recently.
Mm-hmm. Instructional resources like that. How do you find yourself? Do you engage with that type of stuff as much as you used to, or how do you use, if at all,
Yeah.
sort of external resources like that now?
It might be taboo, man, but I watch all the instructionals I can, but I just don't take away the techniques the same way. Like, I don't want to say any names, but let's just say I just watched this one specific instructional, and I was like, this dude just taught the same move 6 different ways, but it's all doing the same thing. And so I
Mm-hmm.
kind of just take away like we call them non-negotiables. He calls them what does he call them? Invariants. Like we
Mm-hmm.
just non-negotiables. Like why is that working here? Like what is he doing that no matter what will create that outcome? So I kind of just watch instructionals for that purpose. Recently I've been into a lot of wrestling instructionals, which have been really cool. Like learning a lot about hip height and head height has been a big deal for me, but yeah, I still watch them. I kind of fast forward through a lot of the like, the self fulfilling, like just egotistical stuff. Like when I do like I just fast forward to see the move and then see what's up. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I still like
I'm
them.
very
Yeah.
much. Yeah, I
Yeah.
still think it's like super valuable, but particularly
Yeah.
like I guess you have to be watching it looking for a certain thing. Like I just watched this Gordon front headlock set, and I was like, bro, that's a
Yeah.
lot of the same shit. But okay, those two
Yes,
things
dude.
I can really
Yes, dude.
like break down and communicate to my room because they're super
Right.
valuable. Like
Yeah.
all of them are about elbow deep, wrist high, or whatever.
Yep.
Like those little things. Like boom, that'll be some of
Exactly.
the things that'll guide. The one actual advantage or thing I do like about instructional still is you get to hear people use a bunch of different language to try and describe the same thing. Like I know people who,
Yeah,
like hate
yeah,
on Danaher, but I
yeah,
like hearing all the different ways you can explain it because like somewhere in there I can reduce that to the simplest thing, and
yeah,
like for me maybe that's just the way my brain works. I'm like that is actually useful to hear this guy try and explain it a couple of different ways because what's the common thread in all the different ways he tries to explain it, like I guess it's just something you want to be mindful of when you're engaging with material like that.
yeah. And for me too, it's like I also don't want to be arrogant enough to believe I know everything because like I
Mm-hmm.
definitely don't. And I feel like every time I talk to someone, they're like, "Oh wow, like you have a good understanding of that." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's because I'm consistently trying to learn on it." Like I don't feel there's so many times where like, especially now teaching eco, where you kind of don't want to tell them the solution. I'm like, I need a better understanding of what this is. Like, why can't I create a great game here? Like, why aren't I able to create an amazing game here? And it's because I have a lack of understanding of certain positions or outcomes. And so then I'll go look at instructionals and see like, all right, what are the outcomes from these beginning positions? What are the things that are non-negotiables that got us there? And then that helps me create the games. So yeah, I have that take as well. Like I'm a big fan of them.
Yeah, just the exact same thing. Uh, yeah, man, you talk a lot about how you used to be like hardcore driller with like Johnny and stuff. Has your sort of approach trickled into the way that you guys approach your pro training, or is pro training for you guys just rounds to the death, or do you try and do a lot of like what is the difference, I guess, in sort of how you bring what you've been implementing in your regular room into that type of room where you mentioned, hey, it's mostly just high level pro type caliber
Yeah.
guys.
So I mean, so I gotta give credit to Gianni. So I've known Gianni for like 10 years now. It feels like 10 years, a long time. I think it's probably 10 years, and like Gianni's a multiple time world champion, has every title in the world. You know what I mean? And so I was just in the beginning like just grateful that he would train at my gym and run a class. And in the beginning, it was just um like rounds. Like he would just come in and we would just do literally it would be like 24 6-minute rounds, and that was it. Sometimes it would be like 12 tens or whatever, just 2 hours of training. And then he came to a few of my classes, and it felt like he was like he came to a class and we did a head and arm scenario, which ended up being sort of a shoulder crunch for him because he was good at that. And so it was a lot of games from that shoulder crunch. And the next week he's like, dude, I've been using the shoulder crunch all week again. He's like, your class like really helped me get back into that. And then he was like, you want to run a Monday class with me? And like it's my gym, like I could do whatever I want, but I respect him highly, and so I just wanted him to run the class and for him to bring it, and for him to be like, hey, do you want to run the class instead of me? And I was like, yeah. I was like, that'd be cool. And so I ran eco games for 45 minutes, and then we did rounds at the end from specific situations. And he was like, dude, that's super helpful. And now he started doing it in his class. So now our classes are mostly for the pro training. It could be anything we want, really, like the day of. But now they feel like they've been. I have a photo of today's because we just did it today as well. So I told you one because we finished one. So we did 5 games. Like for example, we have one game called Just Get Up. Then we did a hips and hook from single leg, half guard with unhook, breaking him back, taking from the legs, and then butterfly double unders game for the first 5 rounds, 6 minutes with the partner. Then we did back and mount specific for 6 5-minute rounds. And then we did 80cc rounds, which is just being aware of the point system at 3 minutes for 5 6-minute rounds. And that feels like it's been our formula for the last like 2 months, gearing up for trials.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. I always like to hear about how we carried over into like a little bit of a different context, because now you're
Yeah.
dealing with people who are already super skilled movers.
Right.
They have so much experience, and how do you
Yeah.
sort of maximize that session? The great thing for me is I found literally like everyone, like every session is always a banger, no matter like what like everyone gets something out. I've never had really a
Right.
session where I was like, man, that just fell flat, because it's
Right.
very hard to have a session that's just dead when it's alive the whole time.
Right, dude. That's such a good point. It's so true. Every class now, that's such a good way to put it. Feels like such a like they learn a ton. Like, it's crazy. I feel like I taught nothing, and after class, they're always like, dude, I learned so much this class. Like, every week now, I get a message like, dude, that game changed my game completely. And I'm like, this is so funny, man. Like, I used to think I was changing people's, like, games through telling them exactly what to do. And here I'm telling them almost nothing, just like, I guess I'm telling them everything, right? But I meant just using as little words as possible. And they're like, dude, it changed my whole game. And I'm like, that's crazy. But yeah, so what I really like about the pro, which took a while to learn because all I had taught prior to that was all levels, was you don't need to give them the specifics or narrow down the learning because they already know so much. At least most of us do. So now it's been a lot more fun for me to be like, all right, let's start from here. Here are the two outcomes. Get to them. And they just find their own way. That's been really cool.
Yeah. I was going to say something here. Lost it. It's gone.
Could I ask you a question? Because
please.
I've watched.
Both ways.
All right, cool. Yeah, because I've seen so many of your clips. I first came across you when I saw you talking to Greg, and then you were talking to somebody else. I forget who you were, and I was like, oh, this guy's got a good vibe. Like, I just don't know much about you. Where's your gym at?
Just outside of Vancouver, Canada.
Oh, so you're in Canada.
Coast. Yeah.
Snap. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So we're up here. Yeah, and my school is like probably like 2/3 youth, 1/3 adults. We have like close to 400 students. So we've had like a gang of experience sort of like playing with it across a full spectrum. Because even our like 4-year-olds are full live the whole time, all the way up and through. So like,
I have questions, man.
Yeah. We can always flip this both ways.
Yeah.
If you have questions, I'm down to.
Could I ask them? Yeah. So I'm starting a kids program, which I was like dreading. We didn't do it the whole first year, and we're starting a kids program now in April 1st actually. So we're close. Like, I guess I have some questions. So my first question would be, everyone I've talked to is like, you can't make it all jiu-jitsu. Like, there's got to be a part of it that's like just games for the kids, like fun games, like people can keep saying sharks and minnows or something like that. Like, do you find yourself doing that as well? Or is it like full just eco games?
Yeah. So real quick, when it comes to like the kids program, one thing we have to understand is like different stages of their life. So my youth program has a couple elements, but one is of course just like straight physical literacy. So we still do warm-ups that are like tumbling, crawling, calisthenics, etc. because they need that because they're not a mover, right? So that's one thing we for sure have in there. Second thing is probably about of a 45-minute session, which is usually what we run, probably about 25 minutes is grappling games. So things that we would do in the adult session usually sort of looks more like what you might consider like a level 1 or level 2 in terms of like scaled focus. But then we always finish with a game for straight fun, but it still is physical in the sense that they're still going to wrestle, they're still going to do things like that in that game for straight fun, or it'll be a game for straight fun that is just to develop them as an athlete. So our game isn't just like, let's play something not useless, but still trying to have like a secondary benefit, but fun primary. Reason we do that is kids, man, even adults are emotional little creatures. So if you just grappled, and grappling is real the whole time, right? You still want a good reset, but the reset is not just because like, we're trying to just make them play dodgeball the whole time or something like that. It's because we also want to be pushing some of that social growth, some of that sort of connection stuff. But for us, like, man, we might never do the game and play like a quick game of like run around tag for like 90 seconds. We're not allocating a ton of time. It does have a role in there, just sort of like encapsulate, because you want energy to be high throughout the class. And if I can end it on a super high note, it's just a positive thing. Plus, it gives the chance for those athletes to interact with their coaches and the other classmates in a different way, right? So
that's awesome.
That sort of social element there too.
Yeah,
but man,
I'm really curious
the whole time. They can
to see what it's like.
Time.
Because like, just like when I opened up this gym, I was like, man, our classes are gonna be hardcore, and I was quickly woken up that like some of these dudes have a family, they're working a job, like they're not interested in that, and so like my whole coaching has drastically changed. So I'm really curious to see how that happens with kids as well. So I've been asking every coach I can just to kind of break down my own ego and be like, dude, they're not just going to be little like AOJ computers, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah,
No,
cool.
and it's true, but they can grapple. Like
Sure.
you don't have to like ease off them. And actually, like the more live time you have, the better a coaching experience it will be for you. Because
Yeah.
chances are your ability to do good behavior management sucks. Okay, but
Yeah.
when you have them moving and playing, behavior issues generally are drastically reduced. Because most behavior
Awesome.
stems from one of two things: boredom or confusion,
Okay.
right? And when they're
Wow.
just playing games that are simple in scope, you can remove a lot of that, right? You can remove that initial friction from them. So for us, we found it actually makes it much easier to coach because you don't have to deal with that stuff. Now you just have to deal with the things that come in line with people being live. So now it's like, your biggest things are now spacing, managing for safety because, hey, you have 30 kids all wrestling from the feet. You got to watch out for some stuff, Other
Yeah.
things become more important now, like partnering becomes important. You looking at who's with who and why they're with that person. Is it the right match, challenge point wise, all those
Yeah.
things, which is way better than you having to worry about what do I do when they have to sit still and they're not sitting still, or like
Right.
those type of like
Yeah.
things that that people get frustrated.
That's
Like,
a
oh,
really
they
good
aren't doing
point.
the move that we just showed. You remove all
Yeah.
that, but you open up. I think better challenges for you as a coach.
Yeah. How old is the? Oh, sorry. Give me one second. I just need a charger.
Yep.
Ness, do you know where the computer charger is? What age groups do you guys do?
So we do like 5 to 8, 8 to 13. And then
Okay.
our 8 to 13, we sort of just split the floor, but it's the same session. But all the 10, 11, 12-year-olds are more on one side. This 8, 9, 10-year-olds on the other side type of thing.
Interesting.
We used to do 4-year-olds, and we sort of like
God.
stopped it for now. It's totally fine, though. It's just
I could
they
never
will
do
need
it.
a little bit more attention because they've never been in a structured environment before. So it requires like a pretty high skill level for a coach because they haven't been in a structured environment before. Whereas like now you have kids who are in like grade 1.
Oh my
That's
God.
much easier. They're already sort of like in school. They've already had
Yeah.
to do some things, follow rules. They've already started to
Right.
develop relationships with not authority figures, but people outside
Sure.
of the home. Right? So they're sort of like they're
Man.
used to that. Yeah, but man, you can do all the ages. If you're just starting, I would start at the high end, 8 and up. It'll
Yeah,
be
we're doing
the
7 to 12.
easiest for you. Yeah, it'll be the easiest for you initially.
Cool.
Yeah, for sure. So you're on the right path.
Awesome. All right, good. Cool. So you kind of aligned with a lot of things that people have said, and you encouraged me that. Thank God I found this eco stuff prior to the kids, because otherwise I'd be trying to teach them like the 19 different steps to a Kimura. It'd be like it'd be a nightmare.
Yeah. Yo, actually, I had a question I've been asking everyone a little bit. When it comes to designing like a game or a practice activity, what's your process? So like, hey, I want us to work on this as a broad idea. I'm going to make a game. How do you sort of start thinking of that?
It's a good question, man. So like, I feel like now especially there's such a wide like not dictionary. What do I want to say? Like there's just so much to pick from now. Like I have like the Reddit, like I have a whole. Are you in that Reddit thing? There's like a Reddit eco, like like there's games already plotted there, like, and so I can kind of see and pick from those and be like, oh, I get what's happening. I get some ideas. But most of my games, I guess I just structure with, like I said, how we break it up kind of narrows our focus down. And then I could just focus on like what I'm trying to convey. Don't know, to be honest. I guess I just think, like I'm trying to think of the last game that I've had to design. For example, the top Kimura is a new one we just added from like the top half guard, like kind of reverse half guard position. I was like, all right, what are the outcomes from here? Like, what do I need them to do? So like one option for me would be like they could pass the legs. Like that's an option. So we could develop a game, start from here, get to the mount position, get to the side position, or get to the back position. What's another option they could do? They can get to like the head and arm with their legs, like that, that Yoko. Get to this position, get to that position. Those are some options for the games. And then I start developing them like that. And then I kind of, a lot of times I'll open up, like I'm really transparent with my class. I'll be like, guys, the first time we're trying this game. Let's see how this goes. And then as the game goes, I'll kind of take a gauge of what people are doing, what happened. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I didn't think that could happen there. that's really interesting, and I'll take a note of it, and then the next game I make sure to add it. Or a lot of it for me right now is we're in the process of learning, and so I'll be like, hey guys, we're gonna do this and this and this, and I'm sure you've had this too, where people find a way to win the game, but it doesn't make it good jiu-jitsu. So they're winning the game. They're like, he can't do what you said, and you're like, yeah, but you're flat on your stomach or something, you know? And so then I'll be like, oh, we need to find a new restraint to prevent that from happening. And it kind of feels like that, like we're just carving away at each game little by little. Because we revert back with our system, we revert back to it every 4 or 5 weeks. So we'll come back to the same games, we'll play them again, a little bit clearer, a little bit shortened explanation because we feel sharper, and then with more holes that people are doing. And you're like, oh, I got to plug that up, I got to figure this out. So it feels like, if I'm being not, I've never really thought about it like that. I guess if I am thinking about it, that's kind of what's happening. We'll design it with like a large chunk of clay and little by little chisel it into what we want it to be.
You find not recycling, but do you find you lean on the same couple games for like a certain type of skill you're trying to build, or do you try and always come back at it with some new stuff?
I think our continuous games are like almost always 5, just the way it's been happening, 5 games that we've been doing, and it's just been because I think no matter what level you're at, it helps develop that skill. So like no matter what level you're at, these 5 games we do continuously help. But I've been making a point to make sure I don't recycle each game. Mm-hmm. So like, even though we, like, for example, if we do 4 games from an area, one of the games could be a game we've played so they feel familiar, but I make sure not to my dog's freaking out. But I make sure not to use all 3 games like that. Just give me 1 second.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks. So funny, dude. We still don't have Wi-Fi in my place. Mm-hmm. So I'm at my mom's joint. And I'm like, oh God, what a nightmare over here.
Yeah. Man, I was going to say, what are your sort of those 5 continuous games that you find yourself leaning on?
Yeah, so, okay, we almost always do the Dirty Feet game, which is really just a guard retention game and a understanding of controlling the feet game. That is a game we play all the time. We call it Just Sit Up, where there's a person who's supinated, who's just like flat on their back, and their only goal is to get to the seated position and hold the seated position as long as possible. The top player is just trying to keep them flat as long as possible. Then we have the Just Get Up game, which is a person starts flat on their back, and their goal is just to stand to their feet. The top player's goal is just to keep them on their back. So those are 3 that we commonly play. And then Circles game, we took that from Greg, which is just making sure you get a circle around any part of your partner's body. So, for example, from standing, it's a standing game. Single leg, body lock, head and arm, double leg, as long as you make circles around your partner's body. We do that one pretty continuously. So those are 4. I'm trying to think of a 5th one. I'm blanking out right now. But those 4, we rotate we hammer those pretty often.
Gotcha. And some of those games, they sound like they have like a set win condition that resets them, or are all of them continuous? Like Just Stand Up has to have a terminal sort of end, right?
So when we do the Just Stand Up, it feels terminal because you would think like flip flop, but we made it so that as soon as the person gets up, the other person's pulling guard. So I guess what I meant by continuous wasn't by win condition. I just meant that there's no like pausing, like there's no pausing, and it doesn't. I guess you're right. It isn't really a continuous game in that sense. You're absolutely right. I just meant along the lines of like we've gotten to a flow where like there's no stopping. Like as soon as the person goes up, the next person's down, and they just immediately go into it. And we make sure to evaluate. Same with the circles game. Like as soon as they connect a circle, they just let go of the circle and continue moving. They don't flip flop or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I guess I should be more aware of saying continuous. I just meant I guess I need a better word for that. I should have said just like a lot of movement in the game to kind of keep the warm up going.
Right. Yeah, no, that's cool though. See, that's why it's always fun to probe a little bit.
I guess in that scenario, the Dirty Feet game is definitely continuous because it's the same person on bottom the whole time. The Stay Seated game is continuous because it's the same person on bottom the whole time. The Just Get Up and the Circles game is probably the only ones with real win conditions.
Anything else that you're sort of working on or doing in your room that you sort of want to share, or anything about your implementation or whatever?
I don't know if it's really anything like necessarily special, but something I really wanted to do, and thankfully it's been happening, is I kept from the very beginning. I was like, I just want competition to not have this like kind of energy that it has in a lot of places. I started with this gentleman, Kevin Sheridan, in New Jersey, and then I started frequenting Marcel. And at Marcelo's, there was this air, and it's nothing that they did. I loved Marcelo's more than anything, but it was just this air of like, oh, that guy's a competitor. Like he's a competitor. Like that means he's good. And I was like, does that mean he's good, or does that just mean he like paid $125 to sign up and lost first round? Do you know what I mean? Like, what does a competitor really mean? And so something I really wanted to take away is that like air of, oh, they're a competitor. And so I was like, the way we do that is to make everyone compete. And of our 40 students, we have like 25 of them that compete consistently. And it's not, and I'm not saying we're winning everything by any means, but we've taken away the fear of like, hey, if you go to compete, you have to win. It's like, no, go and collect data and bring it back. And so everyone in our room, at every single class, I'll be like, all right, we have this coming up. Of the 10 people there, 8 of them are competing. And it's just something I've really taken pride in. Because then people come in and they're like, oh, that guy's a competitor. And my school's like, oh, cool, dude. Like, like, what does that mean? Like, what does that really mean? You know? So I've really been enjoying that. That's something I take a lot of pride in. And, you know, we've had some good successes. Like, we were able to win the ADCC Open as a team with 6 competitors, which was, like, crazy. Yeah.
What have you done, like, proactively to sort of foster that culture?
So lead by example is a big part for me. I'm signing up for almost everything I can locally and not internationally so much anymore, but locally. And for example, I'm doing West Coast trials, and I also will push it. Like we have a group chat, and I'll always send a group chat. Hey guys, there's this tournament coming up. Da 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 da. And because we already have such a large, like in the very beginning, it was like 20 students. All of them would compete. Like all 20 of these guys competed. And some of them lost, and we're like, you know what? Like, I don't think it's for me. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. Like, I'm not trying to make you a competitor. I just want you to take away the fear of it. And word of mouth kind of gets out like, dude, you should definitely do it. Like, you're better than those guys. Like, and it just becomes this like confidence booster that I want to say by accident, cultivated in our gym. Just by saying like, hey, like, just do it. There's no fear. Like, if you lose, I think a big thing too, now that I'm thinking about it, is like, making sure they know that I don't care if they lose. Like, I do not care. I want you to win, but more than anything, I want you to put on the best version of yourself, to get better, to come back learning, to, you know, to gain that confidence. Like, that's what I want more than anything. If you win, which just happens to be the byproduct of the way we've been training, awesome. Even more reason to do it. But if you lose, dude, I don't give a shit, bro. Like, I'm happy you were out there. Half the school and other places don't even go. Like, they don't even compete, you know? So it's cool. Like, we go to a local tournament, and in every mat is like one of my guys, and we're like the small school.
Nice.
Oh, yeah,
that's great. And yeah, because I've always thought like if you can make it more like just going to play like a pickup game of basketball and like remove it, it should be that chill. Even like practice should be that chill. You know, like
dude.
You know, in the mindset around it. Because I don't know why it seems like it has to be a life commitment to compete.
Right, dude.
Or it could just be Sunday or Saturday or whatever.
Yeah,
exactly. Falls, whatever, you know?
That's exactly how I feel. And it's also just to what you said, like the pickup game, like I'll also be like, hey guys, this next tournament isn't a pickup game, you know? Like this next tournament is probably for somebody who really wants to establish themselves, but you could get hurt. So like, just know that, you know?
Yeah. No,
it's been really awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of that can come from just the fact that class is so live too. That like I've been finding more and more I have a lot more of like my white belts and stuff who want to compete because it's like, oh, whatever, it's just grappling. Like they just grapple all the time, so it's no big deal. Where I suppose if you're only going live for like 10-15 minutes a session, it can seem like a big deal because like, you know, the way you roll is way different when you don't roll a lot. You know? And the thoughts you have around it, the amount of danger you've been in, I think it just can make someone feel a lot more comfortable or whatever.
For sure. It's been really cool, man. And I've really been enjoying it. And like, it's funny because some of our guys are like masters, like 2 or something like that. And they're always fighting the same guys. Like they in the local tournaments. So like they'll come back to the drawing board or like they'll have a good weekend. And it's like they got to fight the same dude over and over again. So it's been cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Man, we've covered a bunch of stuff. Any other stuff that you've been like loving in your room or yeah.
Um, I didn't think I would love my gym as much as I do. Like I feel like every waking minute, like even on like a day we don't have class, like Friday nights we don't have class because I still work a job, so I have to
Hmm.
work a full night on Friday. And like at night I'll be like, "Hey, you guys want to hang out at the gym?" Like literally just any reason to be in the gym. So I'm just really glad that I came across my business partner who is as good as a communicator as he is and just so business savvy. And no, man, I'm pretty grateful. You know what I am grateful for? That you didn't bring up the reason people know me. Because, like, this is the first conversation I've been able to just talk jujitsu. Like, most people are like, dude, what about your social media?
Yeah. The meme master, bro. Hilarious. I mean, we, yeah, yeah.
Thanks, man.
That's funny. It's true. Yeah, I actually never even think about that. I was like, oh, that is something. But that's why, I just want to make just straight coach talk because I
I
think lots of
appreciate
people
it.
get
That means
value
a
from
lot.
that. Yeah, dude. Yeah, because people were mentioning like, oh, you should check out him. He's doing some fun stuff and like some good stuff. And yeah, so of course, how to get you on, dude.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Maybe this is the perfect place to wrap.
Awesome, dude. I really appreciate you having me on. It's really cool.
Yeah, dude. And I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I learned some little tidbits from you. I'm sure a bunch of other people will too.
Thanks so much, man.
Cool. I'll pause this recording then.
Awesome, dude. If you ever want to do this again, let me know.
Hell yeah, bro. Hell yeah.